Maya Rodriguez clutched her worn canvas bag tighter as the evening rain began to fall. She had just finished her double shift at the diner, her feet aching in her second-hand sneakers, and all she wanted was to get home to her small apartment. The bus stop was crowded with commuters trying to escape the sudden downpour, and Maya squeezed herself under the narrow shelter alongside the others. That's when she noticed the elderly woman sitting on the bench, her clothes drenched and her shopping bag scattered around her feet. The woman looked disoriented, her silver hair plastered to her face, and she was fumbling with what appeared to be a broken umbrella. Maya's heart went out to her immediately, recognizing the look of someone struggling against circumstances beyond their control. As Maya moved closer to offer help, a well-dressed businessman pushed past her roughly. "Move your junk, old lady," he snapped, kicking one of the woman's bags aside. "You're taking up the whole bench." Other commuters either looked away uncomfortably or nodded in agreement, their impatience with the delay more important than basic human decency. The elderly woman's hands trembled as she tried to gather her belongings, apologizing in a soft, dignified voice that made Maya's blood boil. Without thinking, Maya stepped forward and positioned herself between the businessman and the elderly woman. "She's not bothering anyone," Maya said firmly, despite her voice shaking slightly. "Why don't you show some respect?" The businessman sneered at Maya's stained work uniform and scoffed. "Why don't you mind your business, waitress?" But Maya stood her ground, helping the elderly woman to her feet and gathering her scattered bags. She draped her own thin jacket over the woman's shoulders, ignoring the fact that she was now getting soaked herself. The elderly woman looked up at Maya with eyes that held both surprise and gratitude. "Thank you, dear," she said softly. "You didn't have to do that." Maya smiled, noticing the woman's refined features and the quality of her jewelry despite her disheveled appearance. "Of course I did," Maya replied. "Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity." As the bus arrived, Maya helped the woman aboard, making sure she found a seat before finding standing room for herself in the crowded aisle. The businessman shot them both a disgusted look before turning away. Maya caught the elderly woman watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read, something that looked like assessment, mixed with approval. Little did Maya know that this simple act of kindness would change her life forever, setting in motion a series of events that would challenge everything she thought she knew about success, worth, and the true meaning of wealth. 3 days after the bus stop incident, Maya was wiping down tables during the lunch rush when her manager approached her with an unusual expression. "There's someone here to see you," he said, gesturing toward a distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit standing near the entrance. Maya's first thought was that she was in trouble. Perhaps the businessman from the bus stop had complained about her. Her heart sank as she walked over, already mentally calculating how much she needed from her next paycheck to make rent. But the man smiled warmly and extended his hand. "Miss Rodriguez? My name is Charles Montgomery. I'm here on behalf of Mrs. Eleanor Hartwell. She would like to invite you to lunch tomorrow at her home, if you're available." Maya blinked in confusion, the name meaning nothing to her. "I think you have the wrong person," she began, but Charles pulled out his phone and showed her a photo. It was the elderly woman from the bus stop, looking considerably more composed. "Mrs. Hartwell was quite insistent that I find you and extend her invitation personally," Charles continued. "She wants to thank you properly for your kindness the other evening. She would have come herself, but she's been recovering from a minor illness, which is why she was feeling so poorly that day." Maya's mind raced with questions. Who was this woman that she had a driver or assistant tracking people down? Why would she go to such lengths for a simple act of kindness? Charles seemed to read her hesitation and added, "I assure you, Mrs. Hartwell simply wants to express her gratitude. There's no ulterior motive. She was very touched by your help when others turned away." He handed her an elegant card with an address in Riverside Heights, the wealthiest neighborhood in the city. Maya had only ever seen that area from the bus windows, marveling at the mansion gates and manicured lawns that seemed to belong to a different world entirely. Against her better judgment, Maya found herself agreeing. Perhaps it was curiosity, or perhaps it was the memory of the elderly woman's kind eyes and gentle voice. Charles looked relieved. "Wonderful. A car will collect you from this address at noon tomorrow. Please don't worry about your work schedule. I've already spoken with your manager, and he's agreed to give you the afternoon off. Maya's manager, who had been watching from behind the counter, gave her an encouraging nod. As Charles departed, Maya couldn't help but feel like she'd just stepped into something far bigger than a simple thank you lunch. That evening, as she lay in her small apartment staring at the water-stained ceiling, she wondered what she'd gotten herself into. She had no fancy clothes for visiting wealthy people's homes, no experience with that world at all. Part of her wanted to call it off, but something else, something deeper, urged her forward. Maybe, just maybe, something good could come from being brave enough to help a stranger in need. The black Mercedes that arrived to collect Maya the next day was nicer than any vehicle she'd ever been inside. The driver, a kind-faced man named Thomas, held the door open for her with such genuine courtesy that Maya felt her nervousness ease slightly. As they drove through the city and into Riverside Heights, Maya watched the landscape transform from her familiar working-class neighborhood to tree-lined streets where each house seemed more impressive than the last. When they finally pulled through wrought iron gates and up a circular driveway, Maya had to consciously keep her jaw from dropping. The Hartwell mansion was something out of a movie, a beautiful colonial-style home with white columns and flowering gardens that stretched as far as she could see. She suddenly felt very conscious of her best dress, a simple blue cotton sundress she'd bought secondhand 3 years ago. Charles met her at the door, his welcoming smile helping to settle her nerves. "Miss Rodriguez, welcome. Mrs. Hartwell is delighted you accepted her invitation. Please come in." The interior of the house was breathtaking, with crystal chandeliers, marble floors, and artwork that Maya suspected was original rather than prints. But despite the obvious wealth on display, there was something warm and lived-in about the space. Family photographs lined the walls, and fresh flowers filled every room with pleasant fragrance. Charles led her through a sunlit corridor to a beautiful conservatory where Eleanor Hartwell sat at a small table set for two. The elderly woman rose immediately, her face breaking into a genuine smile that transformed her refined features. She was dressed elegantly in a soft lavender dress, her silver hair styled perfectly, but her eyes held the same kindness Maya remembered from the bus stop. "My dear Maya," Eleanor said, taking both of Maya's hands in hers. "I'm so pleased you came. Please sit. I hope you're hungry, because my cook has prepared quite a feast." As they sat down to lunch, Maya gradually relaxed under Eleanor's gentle conversation. The elderly woman asked about Maya's life with genuine interest, listening intently as Maya talked about working 2 jobs to support herself after her mother passed away 2 years ago. Eleanor shared stories about her own youth, growing up during harder times, and Maya found herself laughing at the woman's witty observations about life. There was no condescension in Eleanor's manner, no sense that she saw herself as superior despite the obvious difference in their circumstances. Instead, there was a quality of recognition, as if Eleanor saw something in Maya that others might miss. As dessert was served, Eleanor's expression grew more serious. "Maya, I asked you here for more than just to thank you, though your kindness that day meant more to me than you know. I was having a difficult day, feeling invisible and insignificant. You reminded me that there is still goodness in the world, and that character matters more than appearance." She paused, studying Maya carefully. "I'd like to offer you an opportunity if you're interested. My son runs a company, and they're looking for someone with precisely your qualities: integrity, courage, and genuine compassion. I'd like to recommend you for a position in his organization." Maya's heart raced. Was this really happening? Opportunities like this didn't come to people like her. "Mrs. Hartwell, I don't understand. You barely know me, and I don't have any special qualifications. I didn't even finish college." Eleanor smiled mysteriously. "Sometimes the most important qualifications can't be taught in a classroom, my dear. Sometimes they're revealed in how we treat a stranger at a bus stop." A week later, Maya found herself standing at the base of Hartwell Industries headquarters, a gleaming 50-story tower of glass and steel that dominated the downtown skyline. Her stomach churned with a mixture of excitement and terror as she clutched the folder containing her appointment letter. Eleanor had arranged for her to interview for a position in the company's community outreach division, a role that would involve coordinating charitable programs and connecting the corporation with people in need. It seemed almost too perfect, almost too aligned with Maya's own values and interests. Part of her kept waiting for someone to realize this was all a mistake, that she didn't belong in this world of power suits and corner offices. She'd spent her last paycheck on a professional outfit from a consignment store, and she'd watched countless YouTube videos on how to succeed in a corporate interview. The lobby was intimidating in its grandeur, with soaring ceilings, modern art installations, and a steady stream of confident-looking professionals moving purposefully in every direction. Maya approached the reception desk, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. "I'm here for an interview with the community outreach department," she told a receptionist who checked her name on the screen and directed her to the 35th floor. As the elevator rose, Maya watched the city spread out beneath her through the glass walls, a perspective she'd never experienced before. She thought about her mother, who had cleaned office buildings for 20 years, always entering through service entrances and working when the professionals had gone home. What would she think of her daughter walking through the front door of a place like this? The interview itself was surprisingly comfortable. The department head, a woman named Patricia Chun, seemed genuinely impressed by Maya's volunteer work at homeless shelters and her grassroots fundraising for community programs. "Mrs. Hartwell spoke very highly of you," Patricia said warmly. "She doesn't make recommendations often, but when she does, we pay attention. Her instincts about people are rarely wrong." They talked for over an hour about Maya's vision for connecting corporations with communities, about breaking down barriers between wealth and need, about creating programs with dignity rather than charity. Maya found herself speaking passionately about issues she'd lived, but never had a platform to address. Patricia smiled throughout, occasionally making notes, and Maya allowed herself to hope that perhaps this wasn't just a courtesy interview after all. As the interview concluded, Patricia stood and extended her hand. "Maya, I'd like to offer you the position, pending final approval from our CEO. That's really just a formality, a brief meeting, so he can sign off on all new department heads. Can you come back tomorrow morning?" Maya's heart soared as she accepted, barely believing this was real. On her way out, she passed a large portrait in the hallway, a formal photograph of a stern-looking man in his 40s identified as Alexander Hartwell, CEO. His dark eyes seemed to follow her, and something about his intense expression made her shiver slightly. She wondered what Eleanor's son would be like, whether he shared his mother's warmth and kindness, or whether he was one of those corporate titans who saw people as assets rather than individuals. Tomorrow she would find out. As Maya left the building and stepped back into the familiar chaos of the city streets, she felt like she was balanced between two worlds, not quite belonging to either yet, but perhaps, just perhaps, finding a place where she could bridge them both. Alexander Hartwell's office occupied the entire 50th floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city. Maya had been waiting in the outer office for 20 minutes, her nervousness increasing with each passing moment. The CEO's assistant, a polished woman named Jennifer, had offered her coffee twice and made pleasant small talk, but Maya could sense an undercurrent of curiosity in her manner. Finally, Jennifer's phone buzzed, and she smiled at Maya. "Mr. Hartwell will see you now." Maya stood, smoothing her skirt and taking a deep breath before walking through the heavy wooden doors into the office. Alexander Hartwell stood with his back to her, looking out at the city, his silhouette sharp against the bright morning light. He didn't turn immediately, and Maya waited, unsure whether to speak or remain silent. When he finally turned to face her, Maya was struck by how much he resembled his mother around the eyes, though where Eleanor's gaze was warm, his was penetrating and assessing. "Miss Rodriguez," he said, his voice deep and carefully controlled. "Please sit." He gestured to the chair across from his massive desk, and Maya sat, trying not to be intimidated by the opulence around her or the intensity of his scrutiny. Alexander sat down and opened a folder that Maya recognized as containing her interview notes and background information. "I understand my mother took quite an interest in your employment here," he began, his tone neutral but with something underneath it that Maya couldn't quite identify. "Patricia speaks highly of your interview, but I make it a point to personally evaluate all recommendations, regardless of their source. I'm sure you understand. Of course, Mr. Hartwell, Maya replied, meeting his gaze steadily despite her racing heart. I appreciate the opportunity to be here at all. I know my background is unconventional for a corporate position. Alexander leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers as he studied her. Unconventional is one word for it. You have no college degree, no corporate experience, no track record in program management. What you do have is my mother's endorsement, which she apparently granted based on a single interaction at a bus stop. His words were blunt, but not unkind, simply stating facts. Maya felt heat rise to her cheeks, but refused to look away. That's true, sir. But I also have 5 years of volunteer experience organizing community programs with virtually no budget. I've successfully run fundraising campaigns that increase donations by 200%, and I understand the communities you're trying to reach because I come from them. I can't offer you an MBA, but I can offer you authenticity and connections that money can't buy. For the first time, something that might have been respect flickered in Alexander's eyes. My mother believes you showed courage and character when you defended her from a rude commuter. She thinks those qualities are rare and valuable. He paused, and his expression softened almost imperceptibly. I'm inclined to agree, though I'm more interested in whether you can deliver results. The community outreach position reports directly to me. I expect monthly progress reports, measurable outcomes, and complete transparency in how funds are allocated. Can you handle that level of accountability? Maya straightened in her chair. Yes, sir. I can. And I'll prove that your mother's faith in me wasn't misplaced. Alexander nodded slowly, then did something surprising. He smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his stern features. My mother is rarely wrong about people, Miss Rodriguez. I've learned to trust her instincts even when they challenge my own preferences. Welcome to Hartwell Industries. Don't make me regret this decision. Maya's first month at Hartwell Industries was a whirlwind of learning, adapting, and trying to navigate an environment completely foreign to her. She threw herself into understanding the company's existing charitable initiatives, most of which, she quickly realized, were more about public relations than genuine community impact. Her office was small but had a window, a luxury she never took for granted, and Patricia had been supportive in helping her understand the corporate landscape. But not everyone was pleased with Maya's presence. Vanessa Sterling, the vice president of public relations, had made her displeasure known from day one. Vanessa was everything Maya wasn't: polished, educated at elite schools, connected to old money families, and accustomed to controlling the company's public image. She saw community outreach as part of her domain and resented Alexander's decision to create an independent department. The tension came to a head during Maya's first major presentation to the executive team. She had proposed redirecting funds from a high-profile charity gala to a series of neighborhood programs that would provide job training, after-school care, and small business grants directly to struggling communities. The gala cost $500,000 to host and generated impressive media coverage, but Maya's research showed it actually created little lasting impact. Her alternative program would cost the same amount but reach hundreds of families with substantive support. As Maya finished her presentation, the conference room fell silent. Vanessa was the first to speak, her voice dripping with condescension. "This is incredibly naive," she said, addressing the room rather than Maya. "Miss Rodriguez clearly doesn't understand that our charitable work serves multiple purposes. The gala connects us with influential donors, generates positive media coverage, and positions Hartwell Industries as a leader in corporate social responsibility. Throwing money directly at poor neighborhoods doesn't give us any return on investment." Maya felt her face flush, but she kept her voice steady. "With respect, Ms. Sterling, shouldn't helping people be the return on investment when it comes to charity? And if we document the success of these neighborhood programs properly, that tells a far more compelling story than another ballroom full of wealthy people congratulating themselves." The room tensed as Vanessa's eyes narrowed dangerously. Other executives shifted uncomfortably, clearly unsure whose side to take. Then Alexander's voice cut through the tension. "Continue, Miss Rodriguez. I want to hear more about your implementation plan." For the next 20 minutes, Maya detailed her proposal, presenting research on similar programs, projected outcomes, and a media strategy that would highlight real people whose lives were changed rather than celebrity attendees at a gala. Alexander asked probing questions, pushing her to defend her numbers and think through potential obstacles, but his engagement suggested genuine interest rather than dismissal. At the meeting's conclusion, Alexander approved a pilot version of Maya's program with the understanding that she would need to deliver measurable results within 6 months. Vanessa left the conference room without speaking, her displeasure radiating in every controlled movement. Patricia caught up with Maya in the hallway afterward, her expression a mixture of admiration and concern. "That took guts," she said quietly. "But you should know that Vanessa has powerful allies in this company, and she doesn't forget people who challenge her. Be careful, Maya. Success in this environment isn't just about good ideas. It's about understanding who holds power and how to navigate around their egos." Maya nodded, but privately she thought about Eleanor's words about character and courage. If she had to choose between playing politics and doing what was right, she knew which path she would take. She just hoped she could survive long enough to make a real difference. 3 months into her pilot program, Maya was seeing remarkable results. The job training initiative had placed 42 people in stable employment. The after-school programs were serving 300 children across 5 neighborhoods, and the small business grants had helped launch a dozen local enterprises. Maya had documented everything meticulously, creating compelling stories and data that showed genuine community transformation. She was preparing her quarterly report for Alexander, feeling cautiously optimistic that she could prove her approach worked. But 2 days before her presentation, everything began to fall apart. Maya arrived at work to find her office in chaos, files scattered, and her computer displaying an error message. IT was called, and after an hour of investigation, they delivered devastating news. Somehow, all of Maya's documentation for the pilot program had been corrupted or deleted. 3 months of carefully gathered data, testimonials, photographs, and financial records were gone. Maya felt sick as she stared at the blank screens and empty folders. Without this documentation, she had no way to prove her program's success to Alexander and the board. She would look incompetent at best, fraudulent at worst. "Can you recover anything?" she asked the IT specialist desperately. He shook his head. "I'm sorry, Miss Rodriguez. It looks like the files were overwritten rather than simply deleted. There's nothing to recover." Maya noticed something odd in his expression, a flicker of discomfort that suggested he knew more than he was saying. "This doesn't just happen, does it? Someone would have to do this deliberately." The IT specialist glanced toward the door, then lowered his voice. "I can't prove anything, but the access logs show that someone used administrative credentials to access your system after hours 2 nights ago. Those credentials belong to someone in the executive suite." Maya's mind raced. This was sabotage, plain and simple, and she had a good idea who was behind it. But knowing and proving were 2 different things, and without evidence, any accusations would seem like excuses for her own failure. She thanked the IT specialist and spent the next 2 hours making frantic phone calls to community centers, program participants, and partner organizations, desperately trying to reconstruct her documentation. Some people had copies of paperwork, others could provide testimonials, but she was only able to recover about 60% of what she'd lost. As the day wore on, Maya felt the weight of potential failure crushing down on her. She had worked so hard, and the program had succeeded beyond her expectations, but now it might all be for nothing because someone wanted to see her fail. Was this how the corporate world worked? Were good ideas and hard work meaningless in the face of political machinations and sabotage? That evening, Maya stayed late in her office, trying to piece together what she could salvage of her presentation. She was so absorbed in her work that she didn't notice someone entering until Alexander's voice startled her. "It's past 8 o'clock, Miss Rodriguez. Don't you have a home to go to?" Maya looked up to find the CEO standing in her doorway, his expression curious. Her first instinct was to hide her distress, to pretend everything was fine, but she was too tired and too frustrated for pretense. I'm trying to reconstruct 3 months of documentation that mysteriously disappeared from my computer, she said, her voice tight with barely controlled emotion. My presentation is in 2 days, and I've lost most of my evidence that the program worked. Alexander's expression darkened. Mysteriously disappeared? Explain. Maya hesitated, then decided she had nothing to lose by telling the truth. She explained what IT had found about the administrative access and her suspicions about sabotage, though she carefully avoided naming Vanessa directly. Alexander was silent for a long moment, his jaw tight. "Send me everything you've managed to recover," he said finally. "And go home.
Get some rest.
We'll discuss this further tomorrow." As he turned to leave, he paused at the door. "Miss Rodriguez? In this company, results matter, but so does character. Someone who would sabotage a program that's helping people because of political rivalry has neither. Don't give up on your work just because someone else lacks integrity." His words gave Maya a small measure of hope as she finally gathered her things and headed home. She didn't know how Alexander would handle the situation, but for the first time, she felt like she might have an ally in the fight ahead. The corporate world might be more complicated than she'd imagined, but perhaps honor and justice still had a place in it after all. The next morning, Maya was surprised to receive a call from Charles Montgomery, asking if she could join Eleanor for tea that afternoon. Maya agreed immediately, curious about the timing of the invitation. When she arrived at the Hartwell mansion, Eleanor met her in the garden, looking troubled in a way Maya had never seen before. "My dear," Eleanor said, taking Maya's hands. "Alexander told me what happened with your program documentation. I'm deeply concerned, both about the sabotage and about what it means for you." They sat at a garden table where tea had been prepared, and Eleanor poured with hands that trembled slightly. Maya noticed the older woman seemed more fragile than usual, and she felt a surge of affection for this kind person who had changed her life. "Mrs. Hartwell, please don't worry about me. I'll figure something out." Eleanor shook her head firmly. "Maya, there's something I need to tell you. Something that will help you understand why this matters so much to me, and why I knew from the moment I met you that you were special." She paused, gathering her thoughts. 50 years ago, I was in a position very similar to yours. I came from nothing, worked as a secretary in a manufacturing company, and had ideas about how to improve worker conditions and productivity. The executives dismissed me because I was young, female, and lacked formal education. I watched good people suffer from preventable accidents, unfair labor practices, and systematic discrimination, and I felt powerless to help them. Then one day, I witnessed the company president berating an elderly janitor who had accidentally knocked over a trash bin. Everyone else looked away, but I stepped in and defended him. That janitor turned out to be the majority shareholder's father. Maya listened, transfixed, as Eleanor continued. That shareholder, Jonathan Hartwell, was impressed by my courage. He gave me an opportunity to prove my ideas, and I transformed that company's labor relations program. I also fell in love with him, and eventually we married. Together, we built Hartwell Industries from that small manufacturing firm into what it is today. But I never forgot what it felt like to be dismissed, to have my ideas sabotaged by people who saw me as a threat to the status quo. When I saw you defend me at that bus stop, I saw myself 50 years ago. I saw someone with the courage to stand up for what's right, even when it cost them something. Eleanor reached across the table and squeezed Maya's hand. Alexander is a brilliant businessman, but he was raised in privilege. He doesn't always understand how hard people work to overcome circumstances beyond their control. I wanted him to see what I saw in you, to remember that the best leaders often come from unexpected places. Maya felt tears prick her eyes. "Mrs. Hartwell, I had no idea. Your story is incredible, but I'm not sure I'm strong enough to survive in that world. Someone deleted months of my work, and I can't prove who did it. Maybe I don't belong there after all." Eleanor's expression turned fierce, more animated than Maya had ever seen her. "That's exactly when you need to fight hardest, my dear. Don't let them push you out. The sabotage proves that your work is threatening to someone, which means you're doing something that matters. People don't bother destroying programs that are ineffective. They destroy ones that work, that challenged the way things have always been done. She stood and walked to a nearby flower bed, carefully cutting a single red rose. She brought it back to Maya and said, "This rose grew from rocky soil, pushing through obstacles to bloom." "That's what you're doing, Maya. The resistance you're facing is proof of your strength, not weakness." As Maya prepared to leave, Eleanor walked her to the car. "One more thing, my dear. Alexander may seem stern, but he's fair and he values integrity above all else. Trust him to do the right thing. And trust yourself to weather the storm. You're stronger than you know." On the drive back to her apartment, Maya thought about Eleanor's story and her own journey. She had faced poverty, loss, and countless obstacles before, and she had survived them all. This corporate sabotage was just another challenge, another test of her character. She thought about the families her program had helped, the children in the after-school programs, the small business owners who were building better lives. They were counting on her, just as she had once needed someone to believe in her. She wouldn't let them down. By the time she reached her apartment, Maya had made a decision. She would present whatever documentation she had recovered, tell the truth about what had happened, and let the chips fall where they may. If that meant losing her job, at least she would lose it with her integrity intact. The executive conference room was packed for Maya's presentation. In addition to the usual attendees, Alexander had invited members of the board of directors, including several people Maya had never met. Vanessa Sterling sat at the far end of the table, her expression carefully neutral, but Maya caught a glint of satisfaction in her eyes. As Maya set up her presentation, her hands trembled slightly, but she forced herself to breathe deeply and focus. She had prepared 2 presentations, the one she could have given with all her documentation and the one she could give with what she had salvaged. She was about to begin when Alexander spoke. "Before Miss Rodriguez presents, I have an announcement to make. Over the past 24 hours, our IT security team conducted a full investigation into the corruption of files related to the Community Outreach Pilot Program. I wanted to wait until this meeting to share their findings." The room went silent as Alexander clicked a remote and a screen displayed a detailed report. The investigation revealed that on Tuesday evening, administrative credentials belonging to Vanessa Sterling were used to access Maya Rodriguez's computer and systematically delete or corrupt 3 months of program documentation. The access was traced to Ms. Sterling's personal device, and digital forensics have confirmed the timeline and actions taken. All eyes turned to Vanessa, whose carefully maintained composure cracked. "That's absurd," she said, her voice sharp. "My credentials must have been stolen. I would never do something so unprofessional." Alexander's expression was ice cold. "The access occurred from your home IP address while you were logged into your personal email account. Unless someone broke into your home and used your computer while you were sitting at it, the evidence is conclusive. You sabotaged a company program because it threatened your departmental control and made you look bad by comparison." The boardroom erupted in murmurs as Vanessa stood, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "You're choosing to believe her over me?" she demanded, pointing at Maya. "She's been here 3 months. I've given 10 years to this company." Alexander stood as well, his voice cutting through the noise. "You've given 10 years of politics, manipulation, and putting your ego ahead of the company's mission. Miss Rodriguez has given 3 months of genuine impact and measurable results. The choice is clear. Security will escort you out. You're terminated effective immediately, and our legal team will be in touch regarding possible criminal charges." As security appeared to escort a stunned Vanessa from the room, Maya felt surreal. She had expected to fight for her program's survival, possibly for her job, but instead she was witnessing the dramatic downfall of a corporate executive who had underestimated both her and Alexander's commitment to integrity. Once the room had settled, Alexander turned to Maya. "Miss Rodriguez, please proceed with your presentation. I'd like you to show the board what you accomplished, despite the obstacles placed in your path." Maya took a breath and began, displaying the documentation she had recovered. She shared stories of the people whose lives had changed. Michael, a formerly homeless veteran who now had stable employment and his own apartment. Sarah, a single mother whose small catering business was thriving thanks to the grant program. The the Rodriguez family, whose 3 children were excelling in the after-school program that provided safe supervision and homework help while their parents worked multiple jobs. As Maya spoke, she noticed board members leaning forward, asking questions, taking notes. When she finished, the board chair, an elderly gentleman named Harold Whitmore, spoke up. "Miss Rodriguez, this is exactly the kind of community engagement this company should be doing. Real impact, measurable results, authentic stories that matter. I move that we not only continue this pilot program, but expand it citywide with triple the budget." The vote was unanimous. As the meeting adjourned, several board members approached Maya to shake her hand and express their support. Patricia gave her a quick hug, whispering, "You did it." But the moment that meant the most came when Alexander approached her privately after the others had left. "Miss Rodriguez, I owe you an apology. I should have investigated the sabotage immediately rather than waiting to see how you would handle the situation. It was a test I had no right to impose." Maya looked at him, seeing for the first time the weight of responsibility he carried, the constant need to evaluate people and situations, the loneliness of leadership. "Mr. Hartwell, you gave me a chance when no one else would have. You believed your mother when she saw something in me. And when it mattered, you fought for what was right. That's all anyone can ask for." Alexander smiled, and Maya was struck by how much warmer he seemed when he let his guard down. "My mother was right about you. She usually is. And please call me Alexander. I think we'll be working together quite closely on this expanded program." 6 months later, Maya stood at the same bus stop where she had first met Eleanor Hartwell. The shelter had been renovated as part of her expanded community program, now featuring weatherproof seating, LED lighting, and real-time bus tracking displays. But Maya wasn't there to inspect the improvements. She was waiting for Eleanor, who had called that morning asking to meet at this specific location. When the elderly woman arrived, driven by Charles but walking to the shelter herself, Maya saw tears in her eyes. "Thank you for meeting me here, dear," Eleanor said, looking around at the transformed space. "I wanted to see this with you, to remember where it all began. You've done something remarkable, Maya. You've taken a simple act of kindness and transformed it into a movement that's changing thousands of lives." Maya felt her own eyes water as she hugged Eleanor. "I couldn't have done any of it without you. You saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. You gave me a chance to prove that people from the margins can lead, can innovate, can create real change if someone just opens the door." They sat together on the bench, watching commuters come and go, and Maya thought about how much had changed in less than a year. Her community programs were now operating in 12 cities. She had been promoted to Vice President of Community Engagement, and most importantly, she had proven that corporate success and genuine community impact didn't have to be mutually exclusive. Several of the people she had helped through the programs now worked for Hartwell Industries, bringing diverse perspectives and authentic insights that were transforming the company's culture from within. Eleanor took Maya's hand and said, "I have something to tell you. Alexander doesn't know this yet, but I'm planning to step back from the board of directors at the end of the year. I'm 82 years old, and it's time for new voices, younger perspectives. I'd like to nominate you for my seat." Maya stared at her in shock. "Mrs. Hartwell, I can't. I'm still learning, still figuring out how to navigate this world." "A board position is exactly where you need to be," Eleanor interrupted firmly. "The board needs someone who remembers what it's like to struggle, who makes decisions based on impact rather than profit margins alone, who has the courage to speak truth to power. That's you, Maya. You've proven it time and again." As they sat together watching the evening commuters, a young woman in a work uniform rushed toward the shelter, looking exhausted and overwhelmed. She was carrying several shopping bags that were splitting at the seams, and as she reached the bench, one of the bags tore completely, spilling its contents across the ground. Maya and Eleanor both stood immediately to help, and as they gathered the scattered items, Maya caught Eleanor's eye. The elderly woman was smiling, a knowing expression that spoke of cycles completing, of kindness flowing forward through time. The young woman thanked them profusely, and Maya found herself giving the same advice Eleanor had once given her. Everyone deserves dignity and help when they need it. Don't ever forget that you matter. As the bus arrived and the young woman departed, Eleanor squeezed Maya's arm. Do you see? The circle continues. The kindness you show creates ripples that spread far beyond what you can imagine. That's why your voice needs to be at the decision-making table. Maya thought about her journey from that rainy evening defending a stranger to this moment, standing at the same spot with a life transformed beyond recognition. She thought about all the people her programs had helped, about Alexander, who had become not just a boss but a friend and mentor, about the barriers she had broken and the doors she had opened for others. All right, she said finally, turning to Eleanor with determination in her eyes. If you believe I'm ready, then I'll do my best to honor your faith in me. I'll accept the nomination. Eleanor's face lit up with joy, and she embraced Maya tightly. My dear girl, you're going to change the world. You already have. This is just the beginning. As the sun set over the city, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Maya Rodriguez stood at that bus stop and understood something profound. Success wasn't about wealth or titles or corner offices. It was about using whatever position you achieved to lift others up, to create opportunities for those who had been overlooked, to remember where you came from even as you reached for where you were going. She had been that poor girl who helped an old woman being humiliated in public, never knowing that simple act of courage would open doors she never dreamed existed. But more than that, she had remained that person, the one who still saw people's humanity before their circumstances, who still believed that dignity and compassion mattered more than profit and prestige. Thank you, Maya whispered to Eleanor as they walked toward the waiting car. For seeing me, for believing in me, for teaching me that kindness is never wasted. Eleanor smiled, her eyes bright with tears and pride. Thank you, my dear, for reminding an old woman what really matters. For showing my son and his entire corporation that the best investment we can make is in people, not portfolios. And for proving that sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one with the courage to defend a stranger at a bus stop. As they drove away, Maya looked back at their renovated shelter, at the people waiting there for their buses home after long days of work. She thought about how many of them had stories like hers, dreams deferred and potential untapped simply because they had never gotten the chance she had received. She made a silent promise to herself and to Eleanor. She would use her position to create more chances, to build more bridges, to ensure that kindness and courage were rewarded rather than punished. The poor girl who helped an old woman had become a woman of influence and power, but she would never forget the values that had brought her here, or the responsibility that came with the opportunities she had been given. The story that had begun at a rainy bus stop had transformed into something larger than Maya could have imagined, but in the end, it had always been about the same thing: seeing the humanity in others, having the courage to act on your values, and believing that one person's kindness could change everything. Maya Rodriguez had learned that lesson defending Eleanor Hartwell from a rude businessman, and now, as she prepared to join the board of one of the most powerful companies in the country, she was ready to teach that lesson to the world.